You're listening to the Ask a Theologian podcast, where we explore the intersection between theology and everyday life. Before we get started today, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. You can grab a coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Ask a Theologian podcast. I am excited today to have a very special guest, Dr. Aizaiah Yong, with me all the way from, well, not cold Minnesota anymore. You guys must be having some warm time now. So welcome to the podcast. He brings all sorts of years of experience. He's a practical theologian. He's administrator, spiritual director, author, and we're going to be talking about his book today. So welcome, Dr. Young, to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Real happy to be here and bringing you greetings from the Collegial Institute for Ecumenical and Cultural Research, where I get to serve as the executive director and here at a Benedictine monastery in central Minnesota. So real happy to join you on the podcast.
Benedictine monastery, that already has just my curiosity picked. So we're gonna have to stay away from that topic, although I'm sure it's going to come up.
It will.
Yeah, it'll come up. Now, you last year you released a book along with your mom and dad had a bit to play with
That's
that
right.
as well. Trauma and Renewal.
Trauma and Renewal.
Renewal, and the book's really interesting because the book has several sort of different hats: spiritual memoir, healing guide, theological argument. Now, what made you want to write something like that just kind of encompassed so many different things?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can start by saying I absolutely didn't want to write the book ever. It was not actually part of what I wanted to share. It tells an account of personal survival through a near-death experience on a motorcycle accident in
Right.
2018. And that, of course, was a horrific, difficult moment personally. But my buddy, who was a chaplain and was able to hear a little bit more of the story as I was on my journey of recovery and healing from that, after I shared, was like, Isaiah, he said, I'm telling you something you already know, but I'm just going to say that there's really a book in this, and
Mm,
it's not just for you what you've experienced, but there's something here to offer others who may find themselves in different situations, and just to be able to have a resource available for that. And so that was really thankful to his nudging to encourage me on it, because of course it's kind of an intimate thing to talk about
yeah.
and share publicly. And then in terms of this particular book, you mentioned the contributions of my primary caregivers during the healing journey, especially
Right.
the most difficult times to learn to walk again, who were having to be my parents.
Yeah.
I remember when I was thinking about writing this out, really thinking about the ways that the challenges we go through, the traumas we experience, are not just individual experiences, but
Right.
they affect all those who love us, who show up for us, who walk with us. And so I remember when it came to really thinking about how to share this, wanting to do it with others and hear their parts of it in a
Mm,
certain way as well.
right.
Not only their own challenges along with it, but the things that came to them through the process. And so even in the writing, all that to say was it was part of a healing in and of itself doing the book,
Right.
because it was about returning to that experience in terms of doing it communally,
Right.
listening to one another, and also reflecting on what it means to heal in relationship. All healing is relational,
Sure.
whether it's with ourselves, the divine, and others. And so wanting to be able to offer that and write that was really important to how it came about.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard of your book, you and your dad were presenting it at the Society for Pentecostal Studies, and I just remember one moment in that presentation when your dad expressed his appreciation for the community of scholars and those around him who really had been there. And so that community aspect of it is just huge. And in the book, you draw a pretty clear line between individualistic approaches to trauma care and
Yeah.
more communal, holistic model that you're advocating. So what does that kind of shift? You're situated in the United States. We're here in North America, Western Christianity,
Hmm.
typically very individualistic.
Hmm.
So what does that shift actually look like on the ground, like in a congregation, spiritual direction relationship, community practice?
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I mean, it's a real important piece that I was grateful to experience in my own path, when I think about even the strangers who were willing to risk their lives and actually come to my assistance in the middle of a freeway
Hmm,
as cars were racing past and I was lying in the middle of a freeway.
yeah,
Actual strangers coming around me to provide shield and care and just
interesting.
presence to be
Yeah,
there. all the way down to, being in the hospital and the surgeons and the nurses and the chaplains and the neighbors who came by. And then certainly onward to, family and friends who visited, who wrote, who, sent messages, who sent gift cards to, look out for the family. I mean, you can go on and on.
Right.
And I just recognize that, especially when we go through trauma, these experiences that we can't we're no longer the same. They're liminal
Mm,
experiences where they're a breaking from who we were and whatever we might become, and we don't know where that leads. So when we're in that kind of disoriented state, and it's a very personal thing, no two experiences are the same, we rely on other beings, other
right.
people to help us, to come alongside and help to show us not only the preciousness of our lives and its vulnerabilities, but also to be part of the healing story, right? And they become, it's interesting, like as people show up in those ways to support us,
Right.
they also begin to realize their own gifts and offerings
Mm,
to the body of Christ, but to the world. And so, we need each other. We belong to each other. We need each other. And so while we all have unique personal invitations on the healing path
right.
with whatever we walk through, we find strength in the encouragement of others. And so that's really what the book is wanting to advocate for. It's also wanting to say that many diverse cultural traditions already have this sort of relational approach to healing.
Right.
I talk about some indigenous communities in the book, some of the Buddhist sensibilities
Right.
in the book. And really that's wanting to just show how, you know, apart from kind of the Eurocentric models out there that could be quite individualistic, there are actually a number of other communities that really see the healing path as something relational,
Right.
as something we work at in community, and all the way speaking to the Bible. Of course, we the whole book I wrote was kind of mirroring the Acts 2
Mm,
themes
mm.
related to bearing witness, having visionary or spiritual insights to
Sure.
offer towards healing,
Yeah.
as well as kind of ongoing practices of repair and restoration in community. And so the book was really centered around this vision of Acts 2 of how the early
Cool.
church sought to care for one another
Right.
relationally. And so at the end of the day, there's practices in the book that allow all of us, even if we're not therapists or spiritual directors, to begin to practice a kind of presence in which others might step deeper into their own healing as we're with them. And that's really what the invitation of the book is inviting.
And you're not just talking about, physical trauma, you're talking about any type of trauma. And now you also integrate into your book the internal family systems
Mhm.
and, alongside contemplative practice, but also Pentecostal spirituality, which are pretty, divergent kinda,
Right.
um, and how do those kind of work together? How do they kind of push on each other and shape each
Yeah.
other?
Right, right. No, thank you for picking up on that. Yeah, so I've been trained in a healing modality called internal family systems,
Yeah.
and so it was a therapeutic modality that was really building off of family systems therapy.
Right.
Right, the notion was that inside all of us there is a sense of internal family. There's lots of
Mhm.
parts going on, and the ability to heal lies in our ability to harmonize the parts within ourselves through the wisdom within. And for the therapeutic modality, they call this the self. From a Christian
Right.
theological perspective, we might call it the spirit, right?
Right.
Or the imago Dei within us that can hold and continuously weave the fragments of our lives in new creative ways. And
Right.
so that's where we turn the suffering into something creative through that
Mm.
love, through the compassion. And so when you think about Pentecostal spirituality
Right.
and the sense of empowerment and experiential nature of God, you think about the many tongues of
Yeah. Yeah.
Pentecost that affirm a sort of rich diversity of the church, but also if we, I just wrote a recent article with my father related to IFS and a Pentecostal vision about how the many tongues within
Right.
could be another invitation. And so those are the threads I wanted to weave. And then with the contemplative tradition, again, it's about this practice of being in relationship to the fullness of life,
Okay.
and so we think about the Christian contemplative teachings, whether it's Howard Thurman in the United States
Right.
context or folks like Thomas Merton. They are all advocating for a certain way of living in deep connection with the whole.
Right.
And so there's these practices from monastic traditions, from
Ignatian. Yeah.
uh, Ignatian spirituality,
Mhm.
Gentlemen of Norwich, right?
Yeah.
All these teachings are also about how we show up more intentionally, honestly, authentically in service to the world. And so what I think, even though they're all different, what I was seeing in terms of the connection was a sort of personal, experiential,
Right.
empowering way to deal with the suffering of the world so that it might be transformed. And so
Right.
we might be able to carve paths on these various healing paths and be able to integrate them somehow and kind of find their expression. Then we're also able to move through the things that we see using the resources or the traditions that are being offered to us,
Right.
and recognizing, well, people have thought about some of these things, and how do we bring them about anew, right?
Right.
So,
Right. You mentioned Imago Dei in the
mhm,
conversation, and I don't know if you're familiar with Andy Everhart. He's at London School of Theology. Andy Andy takes a different take on that, because we wrestle with what is the Imago Dei, and we're
mhm,
having all this conversation. He says he finds a better description as the communal day, that it's actually the image of
mhm,
God is not found in an individual. It's actually
right.
found in the relationship. And so I thought that was just great how you, brought the relationship and all that together into the Imago Dei. I think that really makes a lot of sense. Now, coming
Love
out
it.
of a Pentecostal charismatic
Yeah.
community, which with its strong, we have a pretty strong theology and healing and breakthrough historically, but that can put a lot of pressure on people. So how does your framework engage, kind of that I'd say maybe a deficit in our theology. We have a great healing theology, not so much on a suffering theology.
Sure. Right. 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 That's a really interesting way to put it. Yeah. So I would say, right, that healing and the journey, I would say something like, for me, the beauty of this invitation to healing, a holistic healing that Pentecostal spirituality really affirms, is also in this mystery of given and yet not fully realized, right? The
Right.
already
Yeah.
and not yet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think in some ways we can, as you say, easily put pressure on ourselves to conform our vision of what healing looks like
Sure. Yeah.
onto things rather than really participating in this mystery of healing that is certainly present throughout the gospels and the death and resurrection of Christ,
Yeah.
as well as the early church, right? I mean, the early church is not absent of challenges
No, that's true.
and questions and illnesses,
Yeah.
right? And things that don't go a certain way. And so, well, then how do we really articulate healing or wholeness? And I would like to say something like wholeness and healing is an ongoing verb and practice.
Mm, good. I
And
like
so
that.
we're always returning to this sort of tending to the wounding or the suffering within ourselves,
Right.
tending and being present to the wounding and suffering of others, tending and suffering even to the wounding of the earth, as the
Right.
earth cries out for
Sure. Yeah.
renewal
Yeah.
to be made known. Like this sort of call to be a healer and be a healing presence is kind of never finished in some way, as
Right.
we're always, at least as human beings, invited to allow our hearts to be broken open,
Mm,
allow our sense of how we thought things might go to be disturbed and transformed by the Spirit, who
right.
will continue to be present with us. But ultimately, my hope is, and where I think the faith journey calls us, is to continue to say yes to life
Right. Right.
in all that life brings us and the challenges therein. Yes to the joys of life, the pleasures, the beauties. Yes to the sorrows,
Mm,
to the questions, to the doubts, to the pains, to the unresolved
right.
things. It's a yes. And as we practice that yes, that incarnational yes, I believe the resurrection is already beginning to reemerge and reweave our lives in ever new ways. And that's kind of the hope we have,
Yeah.
that even when we don't see that outcome in whatever way, like our yes is already part of this eternal healing
Right.
that all creation is being invited into.
So what would you say to the person that goes, I'm struggling with my healing. I just feel like I don't have
Mhm.
enough faith. If I had more faith, I would, I'd get healed better. And what would you say to that? I mean, I love how you said the mystery of healing. I
Yeah.
think that's really important. But how would you respond pastorally and practically to the person that goes, I've just been believing for my healing. I just feel like I don't have enough faith. Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a real feeling. I know that I felt some of those things in my life before,
Hmm.
but I would say at least where I'm at today, what's helped me is to recognize that God says yes to me in the midst of my questions.
Wow.
And, again, one of the biggest takeaways from my accident and what the book I think tries to recount, the epilogue says, falling again and again. And the idea that every time that there was a hiccup or a longer process to go about my path than I would have hoped for,
Yeah.
and struggling with why and what's not necessarily why, but struggling with how long will
Sure.
this
Yeah.
remain
Yeah. Yeah.
for me in my case. And I know why is another thing people ask, but for me, the question was around how long, and the sense I would get back would be this kind of presencing that says, I still love you right here.
Mm.
I'm with you right here. I don't need you to be like for God saying this, like, I don't need you to be anywhere else than where you are. And I already love you fully right there.
Right.
And
Right.
so, what does it look like to allow that love to continue to permeate every crevice of my soul and my heart against all my resistances to it about what I think may make me not as lovable, not as available,
Right.
whatever the bar that I feel like needs to be crossed so that that love will be realized. God just keeps allowing me to trip over the bar itself and say, like, there's no bar. Like, you just are love. You are just love. And so it's that kind of, but again, how we can receive that gift is also in community,
Right.
right? It's the nurse who comes up to me and says, Isaiah, is there anything I can do to
Mm.
alleviate suffering you have in any small way?
Right.
And just really means it, like as though, he was tending to Christ himself, like
Right.
in my body. And
Right.
it's those reminders of the unexpected people and places, even the joys of a sunrise.
Mm.
Like, have you seen a beautiful sunrise before? What is that sunrise communicating to us other than this kiss from God to
Right.
say,
Wow.
there's a new mercy today. There's a new inbreaking today of my presence and my experience. And so I might be feeling like my healing's not here. I wish this was different. I wish it, but it's about every day, every moment, inviting the experiences and the relations we have with all of life to remind us that we are loved infinitely right
Right.
here. And I think that is a big invitation for us all, but it's also the kind of people that as we go down the healing path, I think we're invited to become with others
Right.
in
Right.
the midst of their own questions and journeys and joys and sorrows.
Yeah. Now, so when I ask you the question about faith, your response is, "You need to know you're loved." It's almost like I hear you going like, Actually, the faith me having the faith is not as important as me knowing I'm loved."
That's interesting. Right, right. Yeah, certainly, right? Like my faith comes from, this experience of knowing I'm loved, right?
Right.
Like the faith is birthed into that. And I think, yeah, if we don't, which again puts more of the onus in a sense on God, right? To say, okay, God, like I don't trust, I don't know where this is,
Yeah.
but somehow you're telling me you love me in that.
Right. Right.
Okay, like what does that change? What does that shift in me? And again, experiencing that love of God in the very simple, mundane, earthy qualities,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is really, I think, where some of that contemplative teaching comes in.
Sure.
That Julian Norris talks about, right? Like the hazelnut, right? Everything being found in the hazelnut of God, or Teresa of Lisieux talks about like the little flower that isn't quite like a rose, isn't quite like a great flower, but like God loves that flower with all of God's self,
Right.
pours all of God into that
Right.
little flower, just as it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, if anything, my experience taught me to learn to experience God's love more of myself in the places
Mm.
and spaces that I thought, were some kind of separation from this love.
Right.
And so it's kind of been the setup in my context of what the path has opened up.
So then, as you know, the book obviously grew out of your experience as a survivor and also as a healer, your work as a healer. So how has writing that down, how has that kind of changed your understanding of your own story, or has it?
Yeah. No, absolutely it does. For me, writing is a deeply spiritual healing practice.
Sure.
Writing allows me to, especially theology, right, to be able to kind of give language to that which is beyond the language.
Right. Right.
And it's not so the writing in itself is never final, but it's like the out breath of something I've received in the in breath,
Right.
and learning how to participate more consciously with this amazing gift of life that we've all been granted, which is wild, which has so many questions to it, but learning to like exhale with that and to find myself more present in that. So I would say the writing itself certainly has deepened my own experience in a way, to be able to integrate it, to be able to kind of create from and with what I've experienced. Also, certainly because I wrote with my parents who are my
Right.
caregivers, a lot came up in that, right? As you can
Sure.
imagine,
Sure.
about, they're reading certain things, I'm reading certain things from them. We're able to have a deeper presence of listening to each other on the journey. And so
Right.
that's been one of the biggest insights, is just more understanding about some of my parents' experiences as they
Mm,
hear what I say came up for me.
right.
And certainly them thinking, them being able to kind of respond back and say, "Oh, wow, I never realized that you were carrying that," or, "Here's something I've experienced that, we've never really shared, but now feels like this could be part of the equation here." And so just again, we're all connected into this.
Mm,
And so I give a lot of kudos to my parents in a particular way for being willing
right,
to even confront and look at some of those things
right.
that are not always easy to confront. But also again, I'll emphasize this piece when it comes to the healing path. You know, moving at a pace of consent and relationship and slowing it down when it's too much. I
Right,
mean, we live in an age where we try to speed life up so much to
right.
get somewhere, and healing and relationships don't work on that timetable. So if we're going to so in writing the book
Yeah,
and, the process of it taking it and even continuing to reflect on it even a year from now, there were lots of moments when it's like, okay, we might need to pause. We might need to like move away from this. Is a little too much right
right,
now.
can't deal with it
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, I can't deal with it right now. And like to love and to have grace
Mm,
on that too, because
right,
that's also part of the fact that we're loved in that. We're
right.
loved right there.
Yeah.
And so rather than this kind of shame or guilt or kind of defensiveness or this thing we do as humans because it's hard to be vulnerable in
Yeah,
that,
sure.
learning to bring that back into grace and mercy and then returning to it as we, this movement between a sense of being grounded in deeply in our bodies in the earth, and then at the same times as we go on the healing path we'll find these moments where we're kind of expanding into the transcendent, and so then we kind of lose our way in that. So it's this dance, right, of
Right.
finding both our sort of connectedness and regrounding, and then also taking a next step and going like, "Whoa, that's a lot," and
Yeah.
that's part of the experience. And so even in the writing, helping me to embrace that rhythm within myself a little bit
Right.
more. And every time we step out in a little bit more courage and vulnerability, we strengthen those muscles well to
Mm,
be who we truly are,
right, right.
but also to be able to love others in that.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. I can't even begin to imagine how painful it must have been at some moments just reliving. Did you find just in reliving those moments that it just because they came up, you went, "I just need more healing in this area?"
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of, I think my life experience so far and, reserve the right to change it up in times to come. But where I'm at today, it's felt more like a spiral of deepening
Mm,
than it's felt like anything else. And so, you go deeper into the descent of healing. And I say descent very intentionally because
right.
for me, the healing is learning to bring heaven and earth together in
Mm.
oneself.
Wow.
So we're moving deeper and deeper into the depths of where joy and sorrow abide,
Yeah.
and that is a lot. It's a lot. And so you do that at one level, and you're like, "Yes, like, I'm in the movement. I've said yes to life. I'm saying yes to God's
Right.
love ultimately doing this." And then you feel like you found a new kind of foundation in that. You say, "Yeah, that's great." And then something happens to break it open again, and you're like, "Woof. Oh my," like, "Okay, I have a strong no right
I
now
know nothing.
to
Yeah.
to where well, yeah, I know nothing and I don't wanna do this. Like, I
Right.
don't I don't know. This is too much. And
Yeah.
so by God's grace, God brings us deeper and deeper into this healing movement. Ultimately, that God, in my view, God is ultimately the one up to. And so I feel like exactly to what you said, on the healing path, there might be elements of our story and our personality or what we've been through that we feel, this feels like it's come to a good place.
Right.
And then we have to circle back again and
Mm,
then integrate even more depths of that teaching.
right.
And so that's where I would say for me it is. But I will say with again back to the trusting the process, God's patience with us, this forbearance of God with us, like for me, this experience of, sometimes judging myself, like, do I really need to learn this lesson again? I feel like I've learned this lesson. I feel like I've said yes to this lesson and I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
And like asking God, like, how long, God, is this? And, God's like, to me, like, I'm with you and I'm with life as long as it takes.
Right. Right. That's amazing promise.
Amazing, promise.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean as long as it takes? Like, cause I got places to go. I got things to do. I want to be
Hey, I
somewhere.
gotta be in
You know,
I gotta be in Minnesota, yeah.
You're like, and God's sense of it all is like, no, the eternity of all I'm doing is
Mm.
right here, right now, with you, with life, in however long this takes, and I'm giving my all to it.
Would you, just kind of expanding on that, and thinking about, somebody involved in ministry, small
Mhm.
group leader, pastor, spiritual
Yeah.
director, whatever. Would you say that part of the or one of the big keys then is gaining a different perspective through all of that
Mhm.
or helping people gain a different, eternal perspective? I mean, everything I hear you
Yep.
saying is like a changing perspective.
Yes. Well, I think that's powerful. I can say that, I think of my parents being the first ones to marry outside of their cultural
Mm,
group
right.
and what that required. Certainly a change of
Yes.
perspective, if not multiple changes
Right.
of perspective throughout their life.
Right.
When I think about metanoia,
Yeah.
right? And I think about really repentance and turning from our own selfishness and
Yeah.
our own attachments and ways of being to God, to giving. And when that in that turning, right? It's like I'm bringing all of my imperfections, I'm bringing all of my questions, and I'm bringing that to you, God. I'm turning to you
Right.
continuously.
Right.
That is a sort of change of consciousness
Yeah.
or invited. I think about the Benedictine vow of conversatio morum, which is they take three vows. One of the major vows they take is this conversion of life, this
Okay.
continuous conversion of life.
Right.
And certainly when you say for people in ministry, there's a challenge, a risk, and a promise to the fact that God's doing a new thing.
Right.
That especially now, and Pentecostals, I think, will love this part, but especially now as we see the upheavals, as we
Oh,
look at the
sure.
big challenges societally and
Yeah.
economically, many others with the earth,
Yeah.
what else is it but God saying, we need a new perspective.
Right. Right.
We need a new way to be with ourselves and with one another. We can't forget what has been, but we can't also be captive to what has
Right.
been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And now we get this opportunity, and I think where our world's at today is to continuously learn how to more deeply love the rich diversity and see
Mm.
it as enrichment,
Right.
which I don't think you can do that without a change of perspective,
Yeah,
as you
there you
said. And
go. Yeah.
so in my own path, what is love but this invitation to be changed again and again
Amazing.
with one another. And so it doesn't mean we don't need to get some skills and tools and do that. And we don't need to do it all by ourselves. Like the body of Christ, I can work on something and change a little bit over here. You're doing that in your own way. And one of the privileges I have as serving at College Institute is I get sometimes a bigger picture to say,
Right.
oh my God, like look what's happening in this tradition. Look what's happening in this part of the world. Look what's happening in this seminary
Right.
and beginning to see how all of us are going about these changes in our own ways, but being able to then honor that process in one another, support each other
Yeah.
in the changes God's inviting us to, and then to celebrate. Like, isn't God good to allow us and invite us into this dance with God?
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Let's dance together.
Let's dance together. Hey, this is just a great conversation. I mean, I know, having heard the story and read the book, and I know the extent of the trauma that you experienced, but I wouldn't know it talking to you. Right now. God's done obviously something amazing, and you've let him do that, which is just an amazing testimony. Remind us again of two things. One, where you are ministering right now, and kind of what
Mhm.
this what that is, and then also
Yes.
let us know where we get the book from.
Great, awesome. So serve at Collegeville Institute for Ecumenical and Cultural Research. We are an intercultural residential research center based at St. John's Abbey and also in deep connection with St. Benedict's Monastery, two Benedictine communities in central Minnesota. And our whole work there invites people on their sabbaticals, to writing workshops, to leadership fellowships who are interested in this intersection of contemplation and prayer, intellectual curiosity, study,
Right.
and building community.
Awesome.
And so we're doing that at Collegeville Institute. Would love to invite folks to check us out there. Look at what we're offering, especially spiritual leaders that are interested in that. And then for the book, you can find it at Orbis Books. That's the
Okay.
publisher. Trauma and Renewal is the title, with contributions from Amos and Alma Young. And would love to have you check that out with Orbis. Yeah, so thanks for
Check
asking.
it out with Orbis. Not available on Amazon, just with Orbis.
No, also with
It's
Amazon. Yeah, I
Amazon.
just was
Yeah.
saying Orbis because it's the publisher, but yeah, you can absolutely get it on all the major places
Amazon.
as well. Yep.
up here in Canada, it's sometimes easier to get things on Amazon.
I hear that.
Yeah, with the exchange rate and everything else, and all the rest of the tariffs. And anyway, we won't go there. But hey, Dr. Young, it's just been fantastic chatting with you, hearing about your book, hearing about things and great insights. I know our listeners are going to love it. So I just want to say thanks again for taking the time and booking in and talking with us about what's going on. Really appreciate it today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation and blessings on this podcast and all that you're doing in your ministry, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for listening to the show today. We normally release about 2 episodes a month, so if you don't want to miss out, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy the podcast, it would really help us get the word out if you could take a moment and give us a review and a rating, preferably really, really, really good. Also, if you've got some suggestions for future guests or topics, please shoot me an email. My email address is Dave, D-A-V-E, at theaskatheologianpodcast.com. That's Dave, D-A-V-E, at theaskatheologianpodcast.com. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk again soon.